Hi guys, let's look at shape and space in photography. So our objective is to be able to describe and recognize how artists use the rule of thirds and space and shape effectively to create successful compositions. So our first words worth knowing is rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is a type of composition in which an image is divided evenly into thirds, and the subject of the image is placed on the intersection of those divisions. So here is an example by Alfred Stieglitz. Second is shape. So shape is a two-dimensional area that is defined and closed in some way. It can be organic or geometric. Then last is space. So space refers to distances or areas around, between, or within components of a piece. It can be positive or negative. So the rule of thirds, it's dividing an image into thirds with two imaginary vertical and horizontal lines, and it creates 9 sections. It's actually based on Renaissance composition with Leonardo. It's a simplified version of what they did. And it makes your photo a little bit more interesting, your composition a little bit more engaging than putting boom, everything smack dab in the center, boom, smack dab in the center. Not, you can't center weight things. But as you're getting started, trying to build better compositions, think about using the rule of thirds. So it is the basis for well-balanced compositions, and then your focal point, important elements should be placed where those lines intersect. So in this photo by Nick Brandt, that owl, that really sad, depressed looking owl, is right there where those lines intersect. So it's immediately drawing my eye right there. So another example. So if you're looking at the two of these, which one do you prefer? Same subject, different composition. And then second, which one more closely follows the rule of thirds? So if you're looking at both of them, the one on the left does not follow the rule of thirds. And also the way the balloon is placed, it almost looks like it's very static, like there's no movement. The one on the right, since they waited for the balloon to kind of float over, creates a little bit more movement. The balloons were about where those lines would intersect, and just by it not being so heavy in the center like that, it kind of gives this appearance that it's floating a little bit more than the other one. So another example of the rule of thirds where it's not quite where the lines intersect, and sometimes that's okay. It doesn't have to follow everything exactly, but as long as your main components are where those lines are, it's going to use the rule of thirds. So in this one, the football player is a little bit off of that line, but it still works. And then landscape photography often uses the rule of thirds, so we're thinking about horizon lines in landscape photography. So either having a top weighted horizon or more of a bottom weighted horizon. So you're playing around with the amount of foreground or background in your work. So when you're photographing a landscape, anything like that, don't put your horizon line right in the center, because what will happen is it'll look like you cut your image in half. So think about moving it up or moving it down, depending on your subject. All right, so shape and space. So shape is a two-dimensional area that is defined or enclosed in some way. So shape. It informs a viewer about the way an object interacts with its surroundings. It can be organic or geometric. So when I say organic, I mean something that's freeform, flowing, from nature, irregular, asymmetrical, something that's kind of hard to define. Think of like a cloud as organic. Geometric has very clear edges. It's very regular. It's sharp. I like to think of these as math shapes, what you learn in geometry, triangles, squares, polygons, those sorts of things. And next, we're going to look at space. So space refers to the distances or areas around, between, or within components of a piece. It can be positive or negative. Positive is the shape of the actual object that occupies space. Negative is the space around and in between positive shapes. So I like to explain it as a donut. The donut itself is the positive, the little donut hole is the negative. So how you treat this in your compositions is one of the main differences between photographs and snapshots. It's also really important in drawing and any other type of art, even 3D art. So how you are interacting, treating that negative space. Super important. So another example, so the chair itself is your positive, all the spaces are negative. So the little spaces in between the bottom and all the, I don't know what that's called, the back of the chair, that would be the negative space. And then branching out from positive negative space, you're going to think of in photography the rule of space. So if you're looking at both, which one do you think is a little more dynamic? Which composition allows the subject some space to breathe, somewhere to look? So if your subject is not looking directly at the camera, or if it's looking outside of the frame, you want to give that subject something to look into. You don't want to cut it off right at the end of your composition, or that means they're, boom, just looking right outside of your composition. You want to give them some room to think. So the one on the right gives her some room to think, whereas the one that was cropped on the left, it creates a little bit more tension. So the empty negative space on the right creates more of a thoughtful feel to it. Do you always have to do this? Absolutely not. Maybe you want to create some tension, but you want to do it intentionally versus by accident. So here's some really good examples. Annie Leibovitz always uses the rule of space really well. So he's looking, he has the space to think. He's not looking immediately, boom, right outside the composition. There's somewhere to look. Another one. So there's space to think. Space to think. And then this one, there's also the shoe in the background, so it's also giving you an implied path to see the shoe, an implied line. And then last, using this can also create the impression of movement. So not only just you're giving your subject somewhere to think, but you're also giving them somewhere to go. So this is a shot of swimmers jumping over the photographer. There's not a lot of negative space here. But when you give them some more, now they have somewhere to go. So if you have someone running or playing football or soccer where they're moving into a space, you want to see if it's possible, give them somewhere to go. Don't just make them run out of the photo. So now they appear to have somewhere to go, and it creates more movement than if it was just cropped really close as before, like this. So again, you have to think about your subject and what you're trying to say in your work though too. So that doesn't mean you always have to do this, but you want to be intentional. That's the key. And then this little horse picture I found. So they have some space to move, some space to run. They're not running immediately outside the composition. All right, so for your practice, let me check off your notes, and then we're going to do a little activity where we do some shape and space examples. So I can't wait to see your work and then what we do for our project. Good job.